Welcome to my YouTube channel, Heardbreak Chronicles, a place where you will hear a large number of fascinating and intriguing chronicles about hearts that are completely broken by female betrayal. Let's not drag on for long. Let's get straight to the point. When I first found that encrypted file on my wife's computer, I thought it was just another work document. Couldn't have been more wrong. That file wasn't just a piece of data. It was a gateway to secrets I never imagined she could hide. Secrets about her affair with my best friend, about the way they stole from me, and how they used my own company to pull off the fraud of a lifetime. By the time I finished reading, I knew I was in danger, and so was everything I'd ever worked for. But if they thought I'd go down quietly, they were dead wrong. It was a quiet Thursday evening, the kind that feels like a blank slate at the end of a long week. My name's Jack Thompson, and at 38, I thought I'd seen enough ups and downs in life to recognize when a storm was coming. Turns out I was dead wrong. The storm had already arrived. I just hadn't noticed it yet. I was sitting in my home office, finishing up some updates on my computer, when something strange popped up. A file called private_accounts_2024 ENC. I almost ignored it. Almost. After all, my wife, Laura, often used my computer for her freelance accounting work. It wouldn't have been unusual for her to leave files on my desktop. But something about this file felt off. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, only to be met with a wall of encrypted text. I might not be an IT genius, but running a logistics company for the past decade has taught me enough about computers to know when something's worth investigating. I ran a basic decryption tool, one I'd used before to recover corrupted documents. What I found nearly stopped my heart. It wasn't just a work file. It was a detailed log of financial transactions, fraudulent ones, offshore accounts, wire transfers, shell companies I'd never heard of before, all connected to my company. My pulse quickened as I scrolled through page after page of transactions, each more damning than the last. At the center of it all was Laura. For a few seconds, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It was like trying to read a language you didn't understand, but your gut already knew the meaning. My wife, the woman I'd loved for 12 years, had been laundering money through my business. And she hadn't done it alone. The name Mark Reynolds kept appearing in the files. My best friend. My business partner. I froze, my eyes darting back and forth across the screen. I felt like the walls were closing in around me. Emails between Laura and Mark detailed their plan. To siphon millions from my company's accounts, slowly and carefully, until they drained it dry. Then they'd disappear. Together. But that wasn't even the worst part. There were photos, intimate photos, of Laura and Mark. I pushed back from the desk, my stomach twisting into knots. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. My best friend. My wife. The two people I trusted most in the world had been conspiring behind my back for years. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced through every memory of the past few years, searching for clues I'd missed. The late nights at the office. The secretive phone calls. The sudden influx of money that Laura always brushed off as client bonuses. How could I have been so blind? I stood up, pacing the room, my heart pounding in my chest. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I needed to think, needed to figure out my next move. But the rage was blinding. I couldn't just sit there, not after what I'd seen. I made copies of the file and saved them to a secure drive. The authorities needed to see this. Fraud on this scale couldn't go unnoticed. But first, I needed answers. I stormed into the living room, where Laura was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. "Hey, honey," she said. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, staring at her, wondering how someone who looked so innocent could be capable of such betrayal. "I found something on the computer," I finally said, my voice tight with barely contained anger. Her smile faltered. "Oh? What kind of something?" I crossed my arms. "A file. Private_accounts_2024. Care to explain?" Her face went pale. For a split second, I saw the panic in her eyes before she masked it with a nervous laugh. "Oh, that is just a client's file. Nothing important. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. Cut the lies, Laura. I know everything. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the floor. Jack, listen. No. You listen. My voice was dangerously low. I trusted you. I gave you everything. And you betrayed me with Mark of all people. My best friend. Her eyes filled with tears. It's not what you think. I cut her off. Don't. Just don't. I've seen the emails, the photos, the financial records. I know exactly what you've been doing. You've been stealing from me for years. And you thought you could just get away with it? Her tears fell freely now, but I wasn't in the mood for pity. I had given her every chance to come clean, every opportunity to be honest. Instead, she had chosen to lie again and again. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I'm giving you one chance to tell me everything. If you lie to me again, I'll go straight to the police. Her lips trembled. For a moment, I thought she might actually come clean. But then her phone buzzed on the floor. I glanced down at the screen and saw a message from Mark. Did he find out yet? My blood ran cold. I looked back at her, my voice barely a whisper. You were never going to tell me the truth, were you? Before she could respond, I picked up her phone and sent a reply to Mark. Oh, he found out. And he's coming for you. In moments of betrayal, you learn what kind of person you really are. I thought I'd handle it with calm and logic, but rage is a wild animal you can't always control. I wanted justice, but first I needed answers. The message to Mark had been sent, and my adrenaline was pumping like never before. Every second felt stretched, every breath heavy with tension. I kept my eyes locked on Laura, waiting for her to crack, but her silence spoke louder than any confession could. Where is he? I demanded, my voice sharp and cold. Is he on his way here? Or are you planning to meet him somewhere? She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she bit her lip and glanced toward the front door. A mistake on her part. Told me everything I needed to know. He's coming here, isn't he? I said, taking a step closer. Of course he is. Why wouldn't he? You two probably have a plan for how to handle me. Don't you? Laura shook her head frantically. Jack, please, you're wrong about this. We can talk. But her words were cut short by the unmistakable sound of a car pulling up in front of the house. My instincts kicked into high gear. Without thinking, I grabbed Laura's wrist and dragged her toward the back of the house. You're staying right here, I said, shoving her into the laundry room and locking the door. Don't even think about running. Her fists pounded on the door from the other side. Jack, don't do this. Please. I ignored her and hurried back to the living room just as the doorbell rang. For a brief second, I considered calling the police right then and there. But something inside me, something primal, wanted to handle this on my own. I peeked through the window. Mark stood on the front porch, shifting nervously, his eyes scanning the street. He had no idea what was waiting for him on the other side of that door. Taking a deep breath, I opened it. Hey, Jack, Mark said, forcing a smile. Laura told me you found something unexpected. I figured we should talk in person, man to man. I didn't return his smile. Instead, I stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. He hesitated for a moment before stepping over the threshold. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud that echoed through the house. Nice of you to drop by, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I was just about to call you. Mark chuckled nervously. Look, I know how this must look, but it's not what you think. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. Then why don't you tell me exactly what it is? He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, I pulled my phone from my pocket and played an audio clip, the recording of his voice from one of the emails I'd found. Once we're done siphoning the last transfer, we're out of here. Jack will never know what hit him. The color drained from his face. Where did you get that? I think you know where I got it, I said, stepping closer. Now tell me, Mark, how long have you and Laura been planning this? How long have you been stealing from me? He took a step back, his eyes darting toward the front door. Look, it wasn't personal. It was just business. We needed the money. And your company was the perfect cover. Just business. I repeated, my voice rising. You were my best friend. I trusted you with everything, and you stabbed me in the back. Mark raised his hands in a placating gesture. Jack, calm down. We can work this out. I can transfer the money back. We'll make this right. I shook my head. It's too late for that. Before he could react, I grabbed him by the collar and shoved him against the wall. The framed photos rattled from the force of the impact. You think you can just walk away from this? I snarled. You think you can steal from me? Betray me, and I'll just let you go? Jack, please, he gasped. You don't want to do this. Think about your future, your company. This could ruin everything. I tightened my grip. You already ruined everything. For a moment, the only sound in the room was Mark's labored breathing. Then, I heard the faint buzz of Laura's phone from the table. I glanced down and saw another message from an unknown number. It's done. When do we collect the rest? My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about Mark and Laura anymore. There were others involved, people I didn't know. Who else is in on this? I demanded, slamming him against the wall again. Who's helping you? Mark coughed, struggling to catch his breath. It's bigger than you think. You don't want to mess with these people, Jack. They'll kill you. His words hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just some petty scam. It was a full-blown conspiracy. I'll take my chances, I said, releasing him. Now you're going to tell me everything. Names, locations, every detail of this operation. And if you leave anything out, I swear you'll regret it. He nodded weakly, rubbing his throat. Okay, but you're in over your head. Once they find out you know the truth, they'll come after you. There's no way out of this. Then I'll be ready for them, I said, my eyes narrowing. And when they come, they'll wish they hadn't. Mark's confession revealed more than I ever wanted to know. Offshore accounts, fake invoices, and a network of dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who got in their way. But I wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not after everything they'd done to me. I had the evidence. I had the truth. And if they thought they could take me out, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The game was on, and I was going to win. I had the evidence, and I thought that was enough. What I didn't realize was that the people behind this conspiracy weren't just going to sit back and let me expose them. They had eyes everywhere. And now that I knew the truth, I was their next target. I spent the rest of the night piecing everything together. The encrypted files, the offshore accounts, the fake invoices. Mark's hasty confession had confirmed what I already knew. This was bigger than just him and Laura. This was a full-blown operation involving dangerous people who wouldn't think twice about getting rid of anyone in their way. By morning, I had compiled all the evidence onto a USB drive. My plan was simple. Go to the police and hand over everything. Let them deal with it. I didn't want to be a hero. I just wanted my life back. But plans have a funny way of falling apart when danger is lurking around every corner. As I was about to leave the house, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We know what you found. Stay quiet if you want to live. My heart skipped a beat. I scanned the room, suddenly feeling exposed. Were they watching me? How had they found out so quickly? A second text followed almost immediately. If you go to the police, it'll be the last thing you ever do. I clenched my jaw, my mind racing. Whoever these people were, they were serious. But I wasn't about to be intimidated. I come too far to back down now. I grabbed my car keys and headed for the door. I wasn't going to let a couple of threats scare me off. The police would protect me, and once this whole thing was exposed, I could finally put it behind me. Or so I thought. The drive to the police station was tense. Every car that pulled up behind me felt like a threat. Every pedestrian on the sidewalk seemed to be watching me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to focus on the road, but my paranoia was getting the better of me. Halfway there, I noticed a black SUV following me. Kept its distance at first, but every time I changed lanes, it did the same. My pulse quickened. It wasn't a coincidence. I made a sudden right turn, then another, weaving through side streets to lose the tail. The SUV followed, its engine roaring as it closed the distance between us. Damn it, I muttered, slamming my foot on the accelerator. My car surged forward, tires screeching as I took another sharp turn. The SUV stayed right on my tail. They weren't trying to scare me anymore. They were trying to catch me. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I sped down a narrow alley, barely squeezing past a parked truck. The SUV wasn't so lucky. It clipped the truck's bumper, spinning out of control before slamming into a dumpster. I didn't stick around to see the aftermath. I floored it, putting as much distance as I could between myself and the wreckage. When I finally reached the police station, my hands were shaking. I clutched the USB drive like it was my lifeline, desperate to hand it over and be done with this nightmare. But as I stepped inside, a strange feeling washed over me, an instinct I couldn't ignore. The station was unusually quiet. Too quiet. I approached the front desk, my eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. "Can I help you?" the officer behind the desk asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I need to speak with someone about a fraud case," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course," he replied. "Just have a seat, and someone will be with you shortly." I nodded and sat down, my heart pounding in my chest. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. A few minutes later, two men in plain clothes approached me. They didn't look like regular officers, more like detectives, or maybe something else entirely. "Jack Thompson?" one of them asked. I hesitated. "Yeah. Who are you?" "We're with the Special Investigations Unit," the man said, flashing a badge too quickly for me to read it. "We understand you have some information to share with us." Every alarm bell in my head went off at once. These weren't cops. They were part of the conspiracy. I stood up, clutching the USB drive tightly. On second thought, "I think I'll come back later." Before I could take a step, one of the men grabbed my arm. "I'm afraid we can't let you do that," he said, his grip tightening. Panic set in. I yanked my arm free and bolted for the door, shoving past anyone in my way. Shouts erupted behind me, but I didn't look back. I sprinted down the street, weaving through traffic as the two men gave chase. My lungs burned, my legs screaming for me to stop, but I didn't dare slow down. I ducked into a side alley, pressing myself against the wall and struggling to catch my breath. Footsteps echoed nearby, growing fainter as my pursuers ran past. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. I was in deeper than I'd ever imagined. These people had infiltrated the police. There was no one I could trust, no one I could turn to, but if they thought they could scare me into silence, they were dead wrong. I still had the USB drive. I still had the evidence. And I still had one last card to play. Back at home, I locked all the doors and windows, pulling the curtains shut. I needed a new plan, something that didn't involve the authorities. There was only one person I could trust now. Matt, an old friend from my college days. He worked in cybersecurity and owed me a few favors. If anyone could help me expose this without getting me killed, it was him. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. "Jack? It's been a while," Matt said, his voice warm and familiar. "What's up?" "I need your help," I said, cutting straight to the point. "And it's serious. Life or death serious." There was a pause on the other end. "Okay, I'm listening." I explained everything: Laura, Mark, the financial fraud, the conspiracy, the chase at the police station. By the time I finished, Matt was silent for a long moment. "Damn," he finally said. "You weren't kidding about the life or death part. Can you help me?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Of course," he said. "But you need to lay low for a while. Don't go anywhere without telling me first. And whatever you do, don't trust anyone." As I hung up the phone, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I had a plan. I had an ally. But the game was far from over. The people chasing me weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted, or until I stopped them first. And I had every intention of being the one who won this fight. When you're up against a faceless enemy, there's only one way to survive. You strike first. Matt had warned me to lay low, but after what I'd seen and what they'd done, I couldn't sit still. The people hunting me weren't just criminals, they were something much worse. And if I didn't stop them, They'd make sure I never saw daylight again. I drove across town to meet Matt in a secure location, a small, nondescript office space he kept for off-the-grid operations. Matt had always been a bit of a tech genius with a knack for hacking into places most people didn't even know existed. If anyone could figure out who these people were and how deep this conspiracy ran, it was him. As I stepped inside, Matt was already hunched over a row of monitors, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Multiple windows popped up on the screens. Encrypted messages, offshore account details, and surveillance footage. "You weren't kidding, Jack?" Matt said without looking up. "This is serious. These people are professionals. Whoever they are, they've covered their tracks well. But not well enough for you, right?" I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He grinned. "Of course not. Give me a little time and I'll crack this wide open. But you're not going to like what I find." I leaned against the desk, my eyes scanning the screens. "What do you mean?" Matt tapped a few keys, bringing up a list of names connected to the offshore accounts. One name stood out immediately: Jonathan Wells, a high-profile businessman with deep connections in politics and finance. "This guy," Matt said, pointing to the name, "isn't just a rich businessman. He's a power broker. He pulls strings behind the scenes, political favors, financial manipulation, you name it. If he's involved, this is bigger than a simple money laundering scheme." My stomach tightened. "So what do we do?" "We expose him," Matt said. "But we have to be smart about it. If we go public without solid proof, we're dead men walking. We need to get more evidence, something undeniable." I nodded, my mind racing. "Where do we start?" Matt pulled up a map on one of the monitors. "There's a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Based on the data I found, it's one of their main hubs. If we can get inside and grab some physical evidence, ledgers, documents, anything, we'll have what we need to bring them down." It sounded like a suicide mission, but I didn't have a choice. These people had taken everything from me. It was time to take something back. The warehouse. We waited until nightfall before heading to the warehouse. Matt stayed in the van, monitoring security feeds and communicating with me through an earpiece. I approached the building cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The warehouse was massive, its exterior lit by a few dim security lights. I could hear the hum of machinery inside, along with the occasional burst of laughter from a group of guards. "Okay, Jack," Matt's voice crackled in my ear. "There are 4 guards patrolling the perimeter. You've got a small window between patrols to get inside. Move now." I took a deep breath and slipped through a gap in the fence, keeping low as I made my way to the side entrance. My palms were slick with sweat as I reached for the door handle, half expecting an alarm to go off the moment I opened it. But the door swung open silently. "I'm in," I whispered. "Good," Matt replied. "There's an office on the 2nd floor. That's where they keep the records. Head there and be quick." The warehouse was a maze of crates and machinery. I moved quickly but carefully, keeping to the shadows. My heart was in my throat with every step, every sound amplified in the eerie silence. When I reached the office, I found it locked. I cursed under my breath. "Hold on," Matt said. "There's a security panel next to the door. Give me a second to bypass it." A few tense moments passed before the lock clicked open. "Got it," Matt said. "You're in." The office was a cluttered mess. File cabinets, stacks of papers, and several computers. I grabbed a handful of documents and started taking photos with my phone. Suddenly, Matt's voice was urgent in my ear. "Jack, you've got company. 2 guards headed your way. You need to get out now." Panic surged through me. I stuffed the documents into my backpack and bolted for the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. I made it halfway down the stairs before the guards spotted me. "There!" one of them shouted, raising his weapon. I didn't think, I just ran. Bullets ricocheted off the metal railing as I sprinted toward the exit. My lungs burned, my legs screaming for me to stop, but I pushed myself harder. "Matt, I need an exit," I yelled. "Head to the loading bay," he replied. "There's a side door that leads back to the street." I burst into the loading bay, dodging between crates as the guards closed in behind me. The side door was just ahead. I threw myself at it, slamming it open and stumbling into the alley. The van was waiting at the end of the alley, its engine running. I sprinted toward it, diving into the passenger seat just as Matt hit the gas. The guards burst out of the warehouse, firing at us as we sped away. Bullets shattered the rear window, but we didn't slow down. "Holy hell," Matt said, glancing at me. "Are you okay?" I nodded, struggling to catch my breath. "Yeah, I think so." "You got the documents?" I patted the backpack. "Every last one." Matt grinned. "Then we've got them. This is exactly what we needed." The next move. Back at Matt's office, we pored over the documents. They were even more damning than we'd hoped. Detailed records of every illegal transaction, complete with signatures and personal notes from Jonathan Wells himself. "This is it," Matt said, his eyes wide. "This is enough to bring them all down." But I wasn't celebrating yet. "They're not going to let us go that easily," I said. "They'll come after us with everything they've got." "Let them try," Matt replied, his expression hardening. "We've got the truth on our side." I nodded, my resolve hardening. We had the evidence, but the hardest part was still ahead. We needed to get it into the right hands without getting killed in the process. The game was far from over. But one thing was certain. I wasn't running anymore. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. In war, they say the first move determines everything. We thought we had the upper hand, but we were wrong. We weren't just walking into the lion's den, we were being invited in. And by the time we realized it, it was already too late. The documents we'd recovered were explosive, enough to take down Jonathan Wells and his entire operation. The key now was getting them into the right hands. Matt and I debated our next move for hours, weighing every option. The police were out of the question, considering how deeply they were compromised. The media was risky, too. There was no guarantee they wouldn't be bought off or silenced before the story broke. Then Matt had an idea. "I know someone," he said, leaning back in his chair. "A federal agent. He's clean, one of the few left in this town. If anyone can help us, it's him." "What's his name?" I asked, trying to ignore the nagging sense of doubt in the back of my mind. "Agent Robert Kane," Matt said. "I worked with him once on a cyber investigation. He's sharp, and he hates corruption more than anything. If we give him this evidence, he'll make sure it gets where it needs to go." It sounded like a solid plan, almost too good to be true. But at this point, we were out of options. "Set up a meeting," I said. "The sooner, the better." The setup. The meeting was arranged for midnight in an abandoned warehouse district on the edge of town. It wasn't exactly comforting, but Matt assured me it was the safest place we could meet without drawing attention. We arrived early, parking a few blocks away and making our way on foot. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the soft rustling of the wind. "This is it," Matt said, stopping in front of a large, crumbling warehouse. "Kane should be here soon." We stepped inside, the air thick with the smell of rust and decay. My eyes scanned the shadows, every nerve on edge. "You sure about this guy?" I asked, my voice low. Matt nodded. "Trust me. He's one of the good ones." But as the minutes dragged on, my confidence began to waver. Something didn't feel right. Then we heard it. A faint rumble in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. "Matt," I said, my voice tightening. "You hear that?" Before he could answer, the doors burst open, and a convoy of black SUVs rolled into the warehouse. The vehicles skidded to a stop, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Doors slammed, and a group of armed men poured out, their weapons trained on us. "Get down," Matt shouted, diving behind a stack of crates. I followed him, my heart racing. "Jack Thompson," a voice called out, echoing through the warehouse. "You've caused us a lot of trouble, but it's over now. Hand over the documents, and we'll make this quick." I recognized the voice instantly, Jonathan Wells. Matt's eyes met mine, panic flashing across his face. "It's a setup," he whispered. "No kidding?" I muttered, clutching the backpack tightly. "What do we do?" "We fight," Matt said, pulling a handgun from his waistband. "We can't let them get the evidence." The fight. Bullets tore through the air as the warehouse erupted into chaos. I ducked behind a crate, my pulse pounding in my ears. Matt returned fire, his shots echoing like thunder in the cavernous space. "We need to move," he shouted. "They'll pin us down if we stay here." I nodded, adrenaline surging through me as I sprinted toward a metal staircase at the far end of the warehouse. Bullets ricocheted off the railings, sparks flying in every direction. Halfway up, I glanced back to see Matt still holding his ground, taking out one of the gunmen with a well-placed shot. But there were too many of them. "Matt, come on!" I yelled. He started toward me, but before he could reach the stairs, a gunman stepped out from behind a pillar, his weapon raised. "Matt, look out!" The gunman fired, and time seemed to slow. Matt staggered, clutching his side as blood seeped through his fingers. "Matt!" I screamed, racing back down the stairs. He collapsed to his knees, his face pale but determined. "I'm fine," he gasped. "Go. Get out of here. I'm not leaving you." But before I could reach him, more gunmen closed in, cutting off my path. "Go!" Matt shouted, his voice breaking. "You've got the evidence. That's all that matters. Finish this." Tears stung my eyes as I turned and ran, Matt's voice echoing in my ears. The escape. I burst through a side door, the cold night air hitting me like a punch to the gut. My breath came in ragged gasps as I sprinted down the alley, the sounds of gunfire fading behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached the van. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, my mind racing. Matt was still back there, fighting for his life. I wanted to go back, to help him, but I knew it was suicide. If I went back now, we'd both be dead. The USB drive was still in my pocket, a grim reminder of what we were fighting for. Matt's sacrifice couldn't be in vain. I had to finish this, for him. A new plan. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind a whirlwind of grief and rage. I'd lost everything. My business, my best friend, my life as I knew it. But the fight wasn't over. Matt had given his life to protect the truth, and I wasn't about to let that be for nothing. I needed a new plan. I needed to strike back. Jonathan Wells and his men thought they'd won. They thought they'd silenced me, but they had no idea what was coming next. When everything you love is stripped away, when you've lost everything that matters, there's nothing left to fear. Revenge isn't just an option anymore. It's a necessity. I sat in the van, gripping the USB drive in one hand and the steering wheel in the other. Matt's blood was on my hands, literally and figuratively. His last words echoed in my head, driving me forward like a relentless tide. Finish this. They thought they'd won. They thought they had silenced me, but they were wrong. I wasn't running anymore. I was going straight for the king, gathering strength. Over the next 24 hours, I prepared for war. Every contact, every favor, every bit of leverage I had left, I called it in. If I was going to take down Jonathan Wells, I needed allies. And not just anyone. I needed people who hated him as much as I did. Turns out there were plenty. Jonathan Wells had made a lot of enemies over the years. People whose businesses he'd crushed, whose families he'd hurt. I reached out to them quietly, promising one thing. If they helped me, they'd finally get their chance to see him fall. By the time the plan was ready, I had a small but determined crew at my back. Former employees, hackers, private investigators, everyone with a score to settle. We weren't an army, but we didn't need to be. We just needed one thing, the element of surprise, the infiltration. Jonathan Wells was hosting a lavish charity gala that night at his private estate. It was the perfect cover for his real business. Deals made in whispered conversations, alliances forged over expensive whiskey. We arrived in 2 vans, parking a few blocks away. I could see the estate glowing in the distance, a fortress of wealth and power. Security was tight, but we had an advantage. Inside information from one of Wells's disgruntled former bodyguards. "Remember the plan," I said, glancing at the group. "We get in, we expose him, and we get out. No unnecessary risks." They nodded, determination etched on their faces. We moved quickly, slipping through a side entrance while the guards were distracted by a delivery truck we'd arranged as a diversion. Once inside, the house felt like a maze, marble floors, towering columns, and chandeliers that glittered like stars. Matt's voice echoed in my head. Stay focused. Don't get distracted. We split into teams, each with a specific task. My job was the most dangerous, getting into Jonathan's private office and uploading the files to a secure server. The door to Jonathan's office was locked, but it didn't take long to bypass the security panel. The room was as extravagant as I expected: dark wood, leather furniture, and walls lined with expensive art. I sat down at his computer, plugging in the USB drive. The files loaded quickly, and my heart raced as I began the upload. But then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The door swung open, and there he was, Jonathan Wells, flanked by 2 armed guards. Well, Jonathan said, his voice dripping with amusement. I knew you'd come back, Jack. You've always been predictable. The guards raised their weapons, and I slowly raised my hands. You've caused me quite a bit of trouble, Jonathan continued, stepping closer. But I'll give you credit, you've got guts. Not many people would walk right into the lion's den. I'm not here for a chat, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. I've already uploaded the files. They're on their way to every news outlet and federal agency in the country. It's over, Jonathan. He laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You think it's that easy? You think a few files will take me down? I own half the people you're sending those files to. They'll never see the light of day. He turned to the guards. Kill him. The guards raised their weapons and time seemed to slow. But before they could fire, the door burst open, and my crew stormed in, weapons drawn. Chaos erupted as gunfire filled the room. I dove behind the desk, my heart pounding. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of shouting. One of the guards went down, then the other. Jonathan tried to make a run for it, but I caught him before he could reach the door. I grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. It's over, I shouted, my face inches from his. You're done. He struggled, his eyes wild with panic. You think you've won? You're nothing. You're nobody. Maybe, I said, tightening my grip, but at least I'm not a liar and a thief. For a moment, I considered ending it right there. It would have been easy, just one quick move, and he'd never hurt anyone again. But that wasn't justice. Justice was letting him rot in a prison cell, watching everything he'd built crumble around him. I released him, shoving him to the floor. The police sirens wailed in the distance. This time, they were the right kind of cops, the ones we'd tipped off about the gala. You're done, I said, turning to leave. Jonathan didn't say a word. He just sat there, defeated, as the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. The aftermath. Jonathan Wells was arrested that night, along with half of his associates. The files we'd recovered were enough to launch a full-scale investigation, exposing a web of corruption that reached farther than I'd ever imagined. It wasn't a clean victory. I'd lost too much to call it that. Matt was gone, and there were scars that would never fully heal. But the truth was out, and sometimes that's enough. A new beginning. A few weeks later, I stood on a quiet hill overlooking the city, a cool breeze rustling the leaves around me. In my hand, I held a photo of Matt, a reminder of everything we'd fought for. This one's for you, buddy, I whispered, slipping the photo back into my pocket. The battle was over, but the fight for justice never really ends. And if they ever came back, well, they'd know exactly where to find me. The end. Thank you very much for listening to this story to the end. I hope you liked. We work for you, looking for and telling you the most effective stories about women's betrayal, shocking intrigue, interweaving the plot and unexpected reactions of angry men. Save us, put likes, write comments, and, of course, subscribe to the channel to not miss any story.